Hello, hello. This is Patty Jo, and I know that I'm still working on some um, audio and other issues. I did want to jump into this other case in addition to our friend Daryl. This is completely different, very, very, wow, complex. And I'm going to start with the end because I don't know. I just have I'm not a lawyer and I want to um, present things that I do know as I know them and not pretend things that I don't know. And this case is about a victim named Elijah McClain. I believe I'm pronouncing the name correctly, who was a 23-year-old gentleman from Colorado. And we're going to jump into really the end. And as you can see, I have up the Law and Crime Trial Network, and we're going to listen to some legal debate. And then I'm going to go into one piece of this. So as you can see, we're doing a verdict watch. So this is the verdict of Jeremy Cooper and Peter Please. I did say it at one point. I can't say it. He's the captain, apparently, in the fire department. I'm hoping to learn how to say the last name appropriately. And those are the two EMS providers or paramedics who have been charged. There's 5 people charged. Apparently, the others maybe are police officers. This is how little I know. I do know that there is a verdict in this case, at least for these two, and how this is separated, I don't understand because I'm not an attorney. But as we dig into it, I'm sure that I'll learn. But there were some issues and police involvement, and then the medics were called, and a medication was administered, and subsequently, and I don't know how far or long or how direct the ultimate outcome of his medical case was, but he didn't make it. So he was then, you know, which parts of these are involved in that. So I'm going to only hit on one particular thing that I do think may have happened, but as we get into it further, we'll learn more. And let's listen to it a little bit, and then maybe I'll break out and do the information that I know, or that what little I know.
And welcome to the Law and Crime Network, everybody. I am Michael Bryant. Yes, I'm an attorney, but today I'm identifying as a candy cane. So I'm ready to go here. We've got a lot to do, and I've been forced to cram this into 1 hour. So stay with us here for this next hour.
We're not going to do the whole hour, I don't think.
2 paramedics charged in the death of Elijah McClain. Jeremy Cooper and Peter Chikuniak are
Peter Chikuniak, he apparently is the captain. So he is a supervisor.
Paramedics involved in this ultimate death. They're charged with homicide for what they did back in 2019, maybe what they didn't do, all related to the death of 23-year-old Elijah. So the jury deliberating as we speak.
Okay, so as a paramedic, you have a duty to act. They probably did. If there's harm to a patient and it's what you've done or didn't do was directly related to that harm, you could be charged as negligence. They've even gone to a criminal act for these 2 providers. So that's pretty serious stuff.
They are out. They got the case yesterday. They should be back about now. It's about 10 o'clock out in Colorado. If you recall, McClain was placed in a chokehold during a police encounter. And when the paramedics came along, he was injected with Special K, ketamine, which has been in the news so much lately, from Matthew Perry to, of course, Maya Kowalski.
Okay, so that is about all I know about this case. Sorry to have stopped him right there. Ugh.
If you get to
Okay. So basically, there was a chokehold, probably not by the paramedics, um, I'm assuming. And then when the medics did arrive, they administered ketamine. And okay, so this is where I'm going to stop this. I probably will do more on this particular video as we go forward, but I'm going to stop here and we'll talk about ketamine and what it is used for in the field setting for paramedics. And many jurisdictions now are using it for what we call chemical restraint and or pain control. So you could use it for both, or either, rather, is a better way to put it. So you use it for either pain control or for chemical restraints. Now we call it chemical restraints. It's really sort of a sedation. Um, okay, so if I broke my femur and I'm a drug addict, or I broke my femur and I'm a cancer patient, and or I broke my femur and I have some other medical problems that a narcotic would not be safe to use, I would probably consider ketamine for that pain control. And that level of drug and the concentration is different. If I have a patient who needs to be chemically restrained or calmed to be safe, that is the other use of ketamine. So if I'm using it for a pain control, I probably would start an IV, I would start fluids, I would put them on a monitor, I would make sure I have a full set of vital signs, including the level of pain. I would attempt to give them the ketamine, and I have used that for that purpose, and it's very effective. And the patient, I don't know that it stops the pain as much as the patient doesn't care about the pain anymore. That's how it works. Now, there's some articles that I'm going to put up from EMS1, which is an online EMS really magazine, or it's a little bit better than that. It's got some information, and particularly from somebody that I know that wrote an article regarding ketamine. Now, as far as chemical restraints, I've used it for chemical restraints once, maybe twice. In the old days, we used to use different drugs for chemical restraints, and the purpose of that is to take someone who is can't or won't, well, cannot really won't, but can't contract to a safety. So in other words, and I've got a really good example. I had one gentleman who we were called in, the police were on scene. We had the suppression side of our department and the medics were there. And so the police and the suppression were there first, and I came up later. And the person was well known to us, somebody who took drugs and admitted to taking drugs, that we had taken to the hospital for several problems with his drug taking. But this time he was, I don't know how to explain. You know where the sidewalk is, and there's bricks, and then there's a little place where they plant trees where they have dirt. And he was sitting in that area, and he kept throwing himself onto the ground and onto the curb and onto the tree. And he had dirt all over him and some lacerations, and his movements were out of control. He was trying to stop. He thought he took a certain drug, but we couldn't confirm what he took. But he was oriented to a certain extent, but not able to control or be safe. He was just absolutely physically out of control. So, and that was probably due to whatever he had ingested. So the medication we had at the time, and we didn't have ketamine at that time, the medication that we did have, there are some risks to that. So I can't get a good set of vital signs. I can't get even a good blood glucose on this gentleman because of his movements and the way he's thrashing about. So I really am taking quite a risk by chemically restraining him. But at the same time, it's worth the risk because he's going to hurt himself and or me. So we put him on the cot. We move him to the medic unit. Um, the cot does have seat belts, so he's trying to stay in the seat belts, and the seat belts are trying to hold him, but it's not enough. So I talk to him and explain to him that I can give him a medication. I give him the medication. As he's calming down, I'm then able to put a monitor on him, a blood pressure cuff, get a glucose, put some oxygen, start an IV, which I'm not able to do if he's thrashing about. And that's something that we'll see that Art agrees with me in his article. But um, chemical restraints are for the safety of the patient. That should be your first consideration. So here is an article from EMS1 regarding ketamine and its use for chemical restraints. It's safer than other drugs, which is why we started using it over some of the other medications that we were using in the past. And possibly over medicating people, really. It can cause some problems, so you do have to. But again, here, let's go to the article that Art wrote. He's a great instructor. I worked with him long ago. He was a great instructor. Okay, so here he says, there's an implication that giving ketamine after they've been restrained is somehow unwarranted. So, like I said, I did put seatbelts on my gentleman, but that wasn't enough. The absence of some type of blow dart mechanism, I'm not sure how EMS providers would administer the medication safely in a safe manner. So, in other words, like I said, you don't have an IV first, not if you really need to use a restraint. So hard restraints can hurt people and break bones. So especially if they're unable to control that movement emotion. So that's the reason that these things are used. I'm not going to go into huge, like, it does this and the mechanism that ketamine works, or the old drugs we used to use. We used to use something called B-52s. We don't even want to go back to those days. That was a harsh cocktail, let's put it that way. A little bit overkill. And this is a lot safer when used appropriately. But it sounds like something went terribly wrong in this case. So, and like I said, very little information about it, but it sounds like something went terribly wrong. And I would love to dive into this if anybody else is interested. I'm going to listen to a couple more minutes, and then we'll see where this goes.
Too much ketamine, guess what happens? Maybe a heart attack. So he's sent into cardiac arrest. He died.
Okay, this guy's a lawyer. Dude, you don't actually know, but it's more hypotensive. People automatically say heart attack.
The defendant's charged with criminally negligent homicide, manslaughter, second-degree assault.
Ugh.
A lot of cases related to this. They tried the cops separately, and we're going to talk about all these varied results and whether they testified, whether they didn't. In this case, both defendants took the stand in their own defense.
Okay. And, I'd like to see that.
First up, so let's tune into some of his direct examination.
Prior to going up to see where the ambulance was, did you see the officers do anything with Mr. McClain?
I did. At one point, I saw the officers, or I heard them say, I told you to stop doing it, something to that effect. And then, I don't know, I can't recall from that time, I can't recall exactly what I heard from either one of them, but I saw one of the officers pick Mr. McClain up and just body slam him hard into the ground.
And this was prior to you turning and going to look for the ambulance?
That was right before I walked back to see where our ambulance was because we needed them. We need our tools, we need our ambulance there, and they weren't there yet.
Okay, so it sounds like this officer was on the suppression unit. People think that this is a separate, and sometimes there are separate systems. Where I am, the medic unit is part of the fire department, but the fact that the suppression or the fire engine or truck and or rescue or whatever suppression unit comes first is just because they've got more people that are doing less with fire. Their fires are more controlled, actually, and we can go into that whole debate another time. But we don't have enough medic units in that jurisdiction to cover the city, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Um, so a lot of times, and I don't know, back when I was in Colorado, um, medics were just being onboarded into the fire department. Paramedics were just being onboarded, but they also used private. And so AMR and some of the private companies would assist. And what would happen is the fire department would get there and a private ambulance or medic unit would come. But they were onboarding at that time, and that was decades ago, medic units into the fire department and incorporating that as one unit. So I don't know if they still use private, or I know their helicopters are hospital based. Out west, a lot of times ours are trooper medics. So every system is a little bit different, but he sounds like he was on the suppression side, and they were either waiting on the ambulance or the ambulance was just there and he didn't know where it was yet.
What, what effect did that body slam, as you put it, have on you in that moment?
Have on him? None.
Well, my sense of urgency got a little broader. We needed to get our tools there. We needed to tend to Mr. McClain, and we needed to help him as soon as we can.
Okay, so you go out onto Billing Street to see if the ambulance is coming, right?
That's correct.
It's not.
Correct.
Or at least you can't see it, right?
And it's dark out, so I would see the reflection from the lights, and I did not see that either direction.
Okay. And so do you start back toward the group at that point?
I do. I started heading back to the group to see if anything has changed.
And what happens while you're en route back to the group?
On my way back, Paramedic Cooper called out to me and said, when they get here, can we get their narcs and restraints? And narcs are narcotics. So those are controlled substances that we keep locked up in a lockbox on our engine, and Falk does the same on their ambulance. And restraints is just...
Okay, Falk. So they are using Falk, which is a private system. So they may not have a full complement of medics in their system. So, and he's correct. Narcs. Okay, so the other paramedic is with the fire department too. So I'm wondering if there is anybody on the ambulance who... Okay, so they are requesting the narcotics, and he's correct in saying that those are the controlled substances that are kept on the ambulance in the control of the paramedic that are controlled substances. It can include fentanyl. It used to include morphine. Some still do. Ketamine, probably a benzodiazepine such as Ativan. Diazepam was a good one. Midazolam is the one that is generally used now, which is Versed, commonly known as. So they want, and ketamine. Ketamine is now in there in many jurisdictions. It's not necessarily a narcotic, but it is a controlled substance.
It's a term for soft restraints. Instead of handcuffs, which are hard restraints, we use soft restraints on a pram for any time a patient is a harm to themselves or other, we restrain them to the pram.
And the pram is also known as a gurney, right?
It is. The pram is known as a gurney, stretcher, pram.
Cot.
Okay. And can you describe for the jury the reason why it was Falk Ambulance that was in possession of those tools that you needed rather than the engine?
Yes, so simply we don't have
It's kind of a dumb question to me. The engines don't have it because they put out fires. Like, the engines don't have those things. They don't have a soft restraint because where would they restrain the patient to? You restrain the patient if you're going to use a soft restraint, which is basically a cuff with a leather strap that goes onto the cot, or what he's calling a pram, or in the old days would be called a gurney or a stretcher. That's all the same thing. It's nothing fancy. But you don't have a stretcher, you don't really have restraints.
a pram or a stretcher on our ambulance or on our engine. That's on the ambulance. Same with the restraints. We don't carry soft restraints in any of our kits or on our engine. And the biggest one is the medication we needed for Mr. McClain was ketamine. And at the time, it was on back order for us, so we did not carry it. We didn't have it on our engines yet, so we had to rely on what Falk carried.
Okay, in 2019, it was just coming into fashion, and this apparently is when that occurred. So in 2019, that was ketamine was coming into fashion, and the using of what we used to use would really be a benzodiazepine and maybe Haldol, which is about as useful as putting grape jam in it. Many of us in the old days would include a possibility of an allergic reaction. We would just include some what is it called? Benadryl, basically. Benadryl. But I think that's overkill. But it was used, we used to call it a B-52.
How long had, to your knowledge, how long had ketamine been approved for use by AFR?
I would say at least a year, probably a year and a half.
Okay, not a big fan of the split screen there, but it's good to be inside the courtroom, so I'm not complaining. Let's get into this case and contrast it with what happened in the prior cases related to some of the officers involved in the death of Elijah McClain. Joining me this afternoon, I have attorney Catherine.
Okay. So I don't want to split in with the officers for this particular recording. I just want to start off with how did we get here? How did we get here? In 2019, there was apparently a sentinel event with a gentleman who became a patient to the Aurora Fire Department and Falk Ambulance. And the police, and they're holding the police and the fire department at least accountable. There appeared to be 5 people that they were holding accountable. So, interesting case. I would love to dive in more. If you are interested, please let me know, comment, and like, share, and please comment, because I do not know a lot about this, and I would love to get some more credible information about what's going on here. Thank you so much for joining.